Hi everyone, and welcome to my next video tutorial where I'm going to teach you how you can use an email instead of a username for account logins in Django. So by default, as we already know, if you want to go ahead and sign into an account in Django, you're going to by default use the default user model, which will take in your username and your password. Now we are going to use a custom authentication model, or the custom auth model. Now we're going to use this package to help us to go ahead and do this. Now there's many ways in which you can create a custom auth model. This is just one way to do it, and it's one of the easiest ways from my experience. So what we're going to do is go ahead and create a simple Django project first of all. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a directory on my desktop. Of course, you can decide how you want to create your own Django project. It's really up to you. So what I'm going to do then is open up my CMD. Okay, I just want to resize this. So just a moment. Okay, perfect. And first of all, you want to install the virtual env package globally on your system. Okay, so you can just say pip install virtual env, so you can install that globally on your system. Okay, great, it's been installed, perfect. Now what we want to do is go inside our dev directory. So I'm going to say cd desktop, and then I'm going to say /dev. Okay, so now I'm in the dev directory here. Now what we want to do is create our virtual environment in our dev project. So I'm just going to say virtual env. And now you want to name your virtual environment. So I'm going to call it venv. You can call it anything that you want. So go ahead and just go ahead and create your virtual environment. So it does take a moment. Oh, there we go, it's already done. Sometimes it takes a while, but not to worry. Great. So now we can activate our virtual environment. So you can just say venv. So this will pertain to the name that you called your virtual environment. And then you want to just say, I believe it is, backspace. You want to say scripts /activate. So you want to say venv /scripts /activate. Okay. Clear this up. And now if we just minimize this and we head over to our dev directory, you'll be able to see a venv folder here accordingly. So what you want to do now is you want to install Django. So you can just say pip install Django, and make sure you install it within your virtual environment and not globally on your system. So whenever you install a package, make sure you install it in your virtual environment. And you can say pip install Django. Now this does take a few minutes, 1 or 2 minutes, I believe. So let's just wait for that to install, and then we can move on with the next set of steps. All right, perfect. So we can see Django is installed. Now we can just type CLS. So CLS is used to clear. So we can now say pip list, just verify that Django is within your virtual environment. So there we have it, Django 4.2, perfect. All right, so what we want to do now is we want to go ahead and actually create our Django project. So to do this, you can just say Django-admin start project. And name your project, I'm going to call it Elevate. So this is where you name your Django project right here. Perfect, let's clear that up. So what we can do now is minimize this, head over to the dev directory, and you should be able to see that you have your Django project in here. So this is named Elevate, and your virtual environment here. Okay, now I know some of you like to create your virtual environment with it and add it to your Django project. The choice is yours how you want to do it. I just like to separate the two. All right, this is perfect. So we can close this up, and what I want to do now is open up a text editor. So I'm going to make use of Visual Studio Code, so an IDE to be exact. So let's open that up. And we're going to use the Visual Studio Code terminal from now on. So what you want to do is you want to go and click on File. Oh, let's just close the following and say Open Folder, and head over to your desktop, and you want to open your directory here, dev. Okay, there we go, and we can see we have our Django project and our virtual environment here in place. Now what you can do here is click on the following option here that says Toggle Panel, and that's going to open up a terminal here for us in VS Code, and we can just move the debug console to the right, and here we are in our terminal. Now before we go on further, sometimes you need to configure your virtual, your Python interpreter with your virtual environment. Now, for those of you that don't know how to do that, usually you don't have to do it, but in the event that you are wondering how to do it, what you can do is head over to your dev directory here. go in venv, and you want to copy this root, this path here for your virtual environment. So what you can do first of all is press Control Shift and P on your keyboard. So Control Shift and P, and then you'll have the option to select your interpreter. So you can click on that. And now you can just add in the path for your interpreter. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my virtual environment where I was just now. I'm going to copy that path, paste that in, and I'm now going to say enter interpreter path, and now I'm going to paste it in, and now you can press enter. Okay, so you don't always need to do this, but it's good to ensure that we don't have issues with any packages or whatnot. So make sure you've got that set. So for those of you that don't know how to do it, I'll show you again. So Control Shift and P, select interpreter, enter interpreter path, and then you want to paste in that interpreter. All right, now what we can do is we can go ahead and activate our virtual environment. So here we are in dev, so we can just say venv /scripts /activate. So our virtual environment is active. Okay, and now we just want to cd into our Django project, which is Elevate, so we can run the python manage.py file. So we can just say cd elevate. So we're now in this directory here. So now we want to run python manage.py run server. So we can just say python manage.py run server. Perfect. Okay, so you can see everything will set up. And what we can do now is head on to the local host. And there we go. So you can see our Django project was created successfully, and we're using Django 4.2. So that's perfect. Let's just close this folder. All right, so we've got that all set and ready to go. All right. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to do some testing so we can understand the concept between our default Django user model and the custom user model that we actually want to make. So before we can move on further, we can stop our server and we can just run those migrations. So we can say python manage.py and we can just say migrate. So we want to migrate all those default migrations within our installed app. So if you head over to settings.py, you'll see, let me just take out this comment here. You'll see here, if we scroll down, we have a list of installed apps. So we just went ahead and migrated all those default databases, database files associated with these apps here. So that's all that we did. Now, I just want to go to URLs and remove these comments. These are really annoying, so you can just go ahead and do that. So we want to access our Django admin page first, okay? But before we can do that, we need to create a super user to access this admin URL. So to actually log into the admin page, I mean. So here in your terminal, you can just run python manage.py, create super user. So we just want to create an admin user. Okay, so I'm just going to say admin, email I'm going to skip, password is enter one in. All right, there we go, super user created successfully. So now we have to go ahead and run our server again to access the default admin page here, which is admin/. So our server's on, great. So now we can just refresh our Django page, working fine. And we can just say /admin. And now what you want to do is you want to actually go ahead and log in with your admin user. Now, interestingly enough here, you can actually change the theme of your Django admin. So just a feature I wanted to mention in Django 4.2, which is rather cool actually. Anyway, so I just want to switch to the docs theme. So go ahead and enter in your credentials here for your super user. Now, once you've entered in your credentials, go ahead and log in. Okay, so by default, we have our user model here, which comes with Django by default. So you can click here on users, and you can see we have, of course, by default, our admin user, but let's say we wanted to add a user by default. So if we say add user here, okay, what we need at least is a username and a password. Now, what we want to do is we want to override this default user model that we have here for adding users and replace it with a custom user model, so a custom auth model, you could say, where we can switch this out, the username, for an email instead. So let's by default go ahead and just create a user here. So I'm just going to say test user 1, enter in a password. Okay, and we can just say save. Okay, and that's how you can create a default user. So now you can go back to users here. And you can see we have our admin user and our default user, and it's taking in a username here as the main field of authenticating ourselves. But what we want to do is we want to be able to use the email field instead of the username field. So what we can do is we can go ahead and create a custom auth model, or a custom user model, should I say, with the help of the following package here. Now, before we go ahead and use this package, there are a few things we need to do. So first of all, we want to delete all of our users here. So you can just highlight everything, delete your super user as well, and say delete selected users, and you can say go. And we're going to be logged out because we are logged in as an admin user, but that's fine. So we can say yes, I'm sure. And we've successfully deleted 2 users. Now what you want to do is head on back to your home page. So at localhost for now. And let's head on to our application. Okay. And you want to just turn off your server for the moment. So just turn it off. And what we need to do first of all is we need to delete our SQLite database. So you can right click on it and say delete. And go ahead and delete that. There we go. So that's a very important step. So make sure you delete your SQLite database. And a part of the reason why we're doing this is because, remember, we are midway, okay, going ahead and actually swapping out our default auth model, okay, with a custom user model. So that's just something important to note here. So generally speaking, if you're midway in a project and you've been using the default Django user model, and all of a sudden you want to use the custom user model, it's not going to work out too nicely for you. So this is why we are going ahead now and deleting the SQLite database. And another thing that we need to do is we need to comment out this admin path for now. Okay, because we need to migrate our admin, you could say our admin app, okay, the default admin app, on top of the Django use email as username package. So on top of the custom user model. So you can go ahead and comment out this admin path here. That's very important. Then head over to your settings.py and you want to comment out this django.contrib.admin path as well here. Now we wouldn't have had to do this if we just went ahead and created our Django project based on the Django use email as username package with the custom user model. But because I wanted to show you a test in the beginning as to how to understand the user model that comes predefined with Django and the custom user model, that's why we have to do this. So make sure you comment the following out here. So the Django contrib admin part and the admin URL. If you don't do this and you go ahead and install the package, set everything up, you're going to eventually run into an error that is an integrity constraint on your database. So I believe it's a foreign key integrity constraint error. So make sure that you do this, very important. So make sure, I'm going to say it again, you comment out the installed app for your admin and your admin here. Very important that you go ahead and do just that. Okay, so if you've done that, what we can do is go ahead and set everything up accordingly. So you want to install the following package here. So Django use email as username. So you can copy the following package here. So we can copy that and we can paste in the following package. Make sure you're installing it in your virtual environment. Okay, let's give it a moment. There we go, it's been installed. Perfect. Now the next thing that we need to do is follow the steps here. So we've installed it. Next we need to add it to our installed apps. So here it is, the following line here you need to add in. So I'm going to add that just below here and I'm going to paste them. This already comes with quotes, so that's fine. So we can add that to installed apps. Then step 3, we need to create an app here called create custom user app, which is going to come in with the custom user models by default. So we can actually copy this line. And here we just want to paste in the following command. So we're creating a custom user app. Okay, so just give it a moment, and there it is. So here's our custom user app. You can see in the models here that it's using, of course, the base user and the base user manager accordingly, and inherits it to overlap, you could say, or go over the default user model to overtake it. Now, what we want to do next is we want to scroll down, and step 4 here, we need to add the new app to our installed app. So we can see here we need to add in our app. So that is the app that we just created here. So this custom user app, we can add that to our settings, paste it just below installed apps right here. You can just add that down there. Now the next thing we need to do is point our Django point to our new auth user model. So we want to tell Django to now use this auth user model based on custom user.user. So this based on this user model here that we've defined in our app. So in settings, we can just put this down here. We can just move the following here and add this to our test settings.py file here. So we've got that now set. Now we can run our migrations and migrate. Now make sure that you still have this Django admin commented out and the URL here commented out as well. So that's very important to do. So make sure you've got that commented out. And now what we can do is just clear this up, and we want to make our migrations accordingly. Now let's make our migration. So we can say Python manage.py make migrations. Perfect. So it's created a model called user. Now we can just say Python manage.py migrate. There we go. So all the migrations are set. Perfect. And we also have our clean SQLite database. So our default Django user model has been replaced with the custom user model. Now what we need to do is let's go ahead and open up our URLs here, and you can keep this here in play. And in settings.py, you want to uncomment this Django contrib.admin, because what we want to do essentially now is we want to go ahead and make our migrations based on all the default database files that are part of this Django admin app. Okay, now all of these database files from Django admin here is going to be migrated onto this new custom user model. So it's now going to take into account the custom user model that we have here. So that's the reason why we need to migrate it after and not before, because if you go ahead and do it before, so let's say you've made this migration beforehand and you have the old SQLite database, it's not going to take into account the custom user model in Django admin. So that's the reason why we need to do it afterwards. So Django admin can recognize this custom user model here, or this auth model here, auth user model here to be clear, before it can actually go ahead and migrate it accordingly. So make sure you uncomment the following here, and you can uncomment this URL path here as well while you're at it. And now we can go ahead and say Python manage.py, and you can say migrations. Okay, we won't have anything there, that's fine. And now we can say Python manage.py migrate. So now it's going to migrate the default database files, as you can see here, onto this custom user model that we have. All right, so you'll see that will be in place. Now what you can do is you can just repeat the process. So you can say Python manage.py create super user. So here I'm going to say create super user. And now we need to put in our email. So you'll notice now that that username field is now gone. So now we're going to authenticate our Django accounts via an email address and a password. So as you can see, as stipulated in the package here, so this app is going to allow us to use an email as username for user authentication. So now I'm just going to say admin@mail.com. So that would be my new username / email, and enter in a password. And again, it looks like I didn't enter it in right. Excuse me. All right, there we go. So we've entered in our password. Perfect. Now what we can do is go ahead to our admin page. So I'm just going to say Python manage.py run server. So we can go ahead and do that. There we go. And let's head on over to the admin page. All right, and you want to go ahead now and log in with your email address and your password for authentication. So you can see now it's now swapped out the username for email address instead of password. So we can now see that the default authentication now for our Django project here is now an email address and a password. So go ahead and enter in your credentials. Right, so once you've entered in your credentials, go ahead and log in. So it's quite cool now that we logged in with the email address. So this is more common if we actually have our application with users. Username isn't always that common. In most cases, you'll need an email address to log into your account. Now we can see that it's now called custom user management. And now we can click on users. And then we have our email address. So now you can see we are now taking in an email address instead of a username. Now, if we wanted to add a user, we can go ahead and create a user. Now, notice this, in this case here, we need to add in an email address. So the whole thing is the same as earlier. The only difference is we're now using email address in place of password. So now you can enter in an email address for a user, a password. So go ahead and add in some data. All right. Now you can see we've added in an email address for our user, so testuser1@mail.com. That would be their username/email now, and a password. So we can now say save, and we can now see that that user was saved. Now, earlier what I was saying, if you get an error at this stage here when you create a user, this is because of the database that you didn't delete in the earlier steps, and because you didn't comment out your Django admin set in your Django admin app in installed apps and the path as well. You didn't comment it out and migrate it exactly as demonstrated earlier. So if you get that error, just go ahead and watch the video tutorial a few minutes back and just ensure that you have that set up correctly. So we can see our users were created, and yeah, that's it, guys. That's how you can effectively go ahead and swap out your default Django username for an email address. And you can use this for authentication. Now, of course, there are many ways in which you can go ahead and set this up in your forums. Now, to give you guys some further guidance, now for those of you that need a sense of direction in what to do next, you'll need to simply go ahead and create your model forms based on the custom user model and not on the default one that is by default given to you with Django. So just some direction there, just to give you some advice as to what to do next if you want to go ahead and create your registration form, register your users, ensure that they logged in correctly. This at least does give you a stepping stone in moving to the right direction. Alright guys, so that's it on how to go ahead and swap out your default Django username for an email as a means of authentication for your Django applications. Alright, so that's it guys, and as always, thank you for the support. See you next time.